Hey, it's the Astonishing All-Star Holiday Special coming live to you. Happy holidays here, December 12th, 2022. We are so excited to be back. This is our third All-Star Holiday Special, and we have some of our good friends with us tonight, some new friends. It's going to be a lot of fun. So firstly, I'm Scott Philbrook, obviously, and this way. That's Forrest Burgess.
Thank you.
It's hard to do the Brady Bunch thing because it's backwards. But anyway, we want to welcome some folks here. One of the first persons that we want to bring up is, of course, Tess Feifel, our right-hand woman, without whom very little would happen at Astonishing Legends, certainly online anyway. So, hey, Tess, how are you?
I'm good. Happy holidays. Happy to be here. It's so warm and cozy.
Yeah, it is nice and cozy. And are you supposed to have like bad weather later? Because you're East Coast, right? So
I have been so excited for this. I have not been paying attention. I thought you were going to say, do you have bad drinks? In which case, yes, I can't wait to show Rich.
Okay. Well, on that note, we are actually going to go ahead. We have a lot of folks waiting backstage, and we'd like to bring them up. We're going to introduce everybody one by one. I guess we'll go alphabetically out of respect for everyone. So first, let's bring up Gledhill, because last name's Gledhill. Paul. Hello, sir. Having a nice beer. This is our friend from the UK. So we're starting very late with him, and we want to thank him for staying up tonight. Paul, thank you for joining us.
Oh, you're very welcome, and season's greetings and good cheer for all of you.
Yes, good cheer, and it's great to have you here. And we'd also like to welcome our returning guest, Mr. Jim Harold. Jim, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Good to be here. Season's greetings, everybody, and glad to be with the august panel to have some fun, frivolity, and Fortean conversation.
Yes, indeed. Thank you for joining us. Also welcoming back Mr. Richard Hatem. Thank you for joining us, sir. And thank you for having a cocktail, even though it's 2:00 where you are. Or no, it's 3:00, isn't it? 3:00.
It's now 3:00. Come on, man.
It's just a martini glass full of Robitussin. So
it's Christmas. It's a Christmas party. Come on, I'm not going to work.
It is Christmas.
Today. What do you want from me?
And we're also welcoming back Mr. Micah Hanks this year, coming back to us from the mountains of North Carolina, not too far from me. Micah, welcome back, sir.
Indeed, welcome to all of you and everyone out there who's tuning in and joining this little holiday shindig. I, too, have brought some seasonal cheer in my, I guess my very merry Yeti mug. So good to see all you guys, and a very season's greetings. Happy holidays to everybody.
Happy holidays. Thanks for taking time. And then for the first time this year, we would also like to welcome Allison Jornlin. Allison, thank you so much for joining us this year.
Hey, everybody. Happy holidays. Yes, I'm the designated driver for this evening. I have some wonderful cherry juice.
Oh, nice. Okay.
I'm drinking. But you know what? I did find that some little elf put this in the fridge. I love all things fae folk. And this is known as the green fairy absinthe.
Oh, nice. Very nice.
So I'm curious. I'm absinthe curious. So anything you guys can tell me about it, I'd love to hear.
Allison, this is the perfect time to do it at the party live, and we'll just track exactly what happens.
Yeah.
Okay, well, maybe I'll just try a little bit and
try a little. Come on.
I don't have like
go wrong.
It's supposed to cause hallucinations, I believe, like proper absinthe from the old days, right?
Right. Well, like I said, it just showed up in the freezer, so and it's got the little green fairy on it, so I'm not really quite sure if it's safe or not. You're not, if the fairies approach you, you're not supposed to eat or drink.
Oh, that's a good point. That's a good point.
If you start
and I've also heard it tastes like anise, so I'm not sure.
So it tastes like what?
Anise.
Okay,
It's just licorice. It's licorice.
Licorice. It's a licorice.
Oh, okay.
If you start seeing Scott with a top hat with a skull on it, you'll know that it's starting to take effect.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
This is also from my favorite scene in Coppola's Dracula when Mina and Vlad Dracul have their date. And they have some absinthe, and I don't know. It always touched me, so that's why this one tempted.
I think it depends on if it has the once banned ingredient wormwood extract in it, which I think is now legal.
That's right. It's the wormwood,
but it should say it on the ingredients label. But who knows? Other than that, it's just going to be a very strong alcohol.
Right.
And if you're the only thing I know is that from watching a documentary on is to pour it over a cube of sugar.
Yes.
That's right. That's right.
But
But
you need a bunch of them to start seeing stuff.
Oh, there we go. Thank you. That's
Ooh.
thank you to the mechanic. He's our director back there. He's
we go.
coming up with these images. Yeah, nice work. Well, before we start getting into our festivities and just kind of shooting the Christmas breeze, why don't we, for people that don't know who folks are, I want to just go around briefly and talk a little bit about who each person is and our backgrounds for people that have not seen a Holiday Specials 1 and 2 or even heard of us, since this show we're doing public and live on YouTube. The first thing I will say is I am Scott Philbrook. I'm co-host of the Astonishing Legends podcast. We're hosting this party tonight, and these are our friends. We've been podcasting about 8 years, and my co-host is Mr. Forrest Burgess. Forrest, do you have anything else to say about what you and I do for a living?
It's just gone on way too long. It just seems
like our episodes.
Yeah, but the best part of it, and it's just funny how we're very flattered that people, they want as much information from us as possible, as much deep divey kind of things, and when we have something fun like this, they're like, oh, I was kind of hoping you'd really deep dive on a particular topic, and they'll have several suggestions. But really, it's a break for all of us, and it's really because a lot of us are podcasters here and have their own media content creation projects that we're doing. But really, it's a time to gather and celebrate what's gone on in the past year, which is what the holidays are meant for. So it's really a holiday and break time for Scott and I, and as well as our good friends and the amazing network and community that's built up around just having a show for free on the internet. And 8 years later, I'm amazed and really cherish this group of folks that I've come to call friends. And that's the most amazing thing that's happened. Regardless of anything paranormal, this is really not only is this unusual, but it's really inspirational for me and Scott. And I'm just glad to call you all friends and have this network going.
Indeed. Well, on that note, Tess, why don't you say how long have you been with us now, Tess? It's been
7 years.
7. I thought it was
21.
Yeah, her first episode was Dyatlov Pass, right?
Mm-hmm.
See, I knew that. It's just been amazing to have your help all these years. So thank you very, very much for keeping us running, or keeping the front of the house going, I should say.
Yes. I know. I'm watching YouTube comments. I think everyone's very excited to be here. There was a lot of comments about Star and Niece.
Yes.
Yes.
And I said this transcript will reveal all.
Yeah, it just depends on where you got it, because I think in Europe it was there's a long history and tradition and regionality to it, and it's got slightly different recipes, but wormwood was the one that's like a lot of poisons, if a little bit you could have some fun, too much, and
I seem to remember they made it legal a few years ago. They were like, no, it's back. I felt like I read something about that.
Yeah, you can have versions of it, but it couldn't have the one poison ingredient, so it would taste like it. But the thing that at least got Toulouse-Lautrec all trippy was because if you look at some of the paintings, there's a greenish cast. Now it's theorized that he was painting a lot of that, or took inspiration while after several absinthes, because it was very popular in Paris of that time. And from what I know is you could import some of it. It just couldn't have that one ingredient of wormwood. But now that restriction may have been lifted. So, and there's a pretty good documentary on Netflix about the whole process. It's quite fascinating. But it's it's one of those herbal concoctions from Europe, like Jägermeister or any of those things that there's a lot of herbs in it. And it's it's fun in small amounts, but it can be abused to frightening proportions. But I've had some. It's the brand Grand Absinthe that a friend of mine got from Czechoslovakia at way back when, and it's just like a kind of a strong bitter alcohol, and I did not have enough to see anything that I wasn't
no hallucinations.
No, not enough to see Kelly Hopkinsville's goblins or anything like that.
Well, I knew you guys were the right ones to ask. How about it?
I don't know if that's a good thing, but I guess
I just thought it was the most romantic scene in that Dracula movie.
Yeah.
It's the green fairy wants you, but Mina, you're safe with me.
Well, so Allison, since you're talking, why don't you tell our audience a little bit about you and your background and what kind of, speaking of content creation, the things that you are working on.
Sure. So I'm a professional weirdo. I started haunted history tours here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin in 2008, and I loved it so much. And my brother lives, Mike Huberty lives in Madison, Wisconsin, our state capital. And I'm like, dude, bro, you got to do this. And so I helped him get started with his first one. And I was teaching then, 4th grade. Oh. And so I just focused on that for 13 years. And he really built the business of American Ghost Walks into the successful money-making venture that it is. Yes, and here we are. He's over on the right there, holding so cool. Our American Ghost Walks banner during the Krampusnacht parade that we recently sponsored in Milwaukee. And I'm in the picture too, but I'm dressed like this. So, so getting in the goblin mode. We'll talk about that later. Yeah. But I'm full time now, and this is in Atlas Obscura actually covered our Krampusnacht this year. So
that is so great.
We feel really privileged, and this was founded by author T. Krulos, who is a great friend of ours. He also runs the Milwaukee Paracon every year, and we're sponsors. American Ghost Walks is sponsors of that as well. And T. Krulos actually happens to be one of our very talented haunted history tour guides for the Milwaukee tours.
Oh man, I want to come do these tours. That just sounds amazing.
Yeah. So I left teaching behind a few years ago, and now I'm professional full-time weirdo writing haunted history tours for many of our different states. We're in 6 states right now.
That is so amazing. Yeah. That's the awesome. Coolest thing ever. That's great.
Allison, would it make you more comfortable if we refer to you as Mrs. Jornlin?
Well, actually, you know what? I have this Miss Jornlin mug in the other room. But
you're still teaching. You're just teaching the dark side.
That's right. Yeah.
What grade is the dark side?
Every once in a while, you get a little something. Like back in 2017, when all that UAP news broke, I ran in and told the kids, "Oh my God, look at the New York Times." But this is what makes current events interesting to kids.
Yeah, they didn't call you up at the next PTA meeting about that?
No.
We've had some complaints about Mrs. Jornlin.
That's right. We have concerns.
So, Paul, how about you? Why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about your show and what you're up to over there in London?
Sure. I'm just enjoying my time off. I retired in May, so I'm at university now and enjoying that. But I do have a podcast called Anomaly, which I do with my co-host Steve. And we have a whole bunch of good people on our side as well. So I've got to do a couple of shout outs to Uncanny Lassie and Bethan, who are both massive fans of both Rich and Forrest. And if I didn't mention that, then they'd kill me. But and Scott and Tess.
It's too late. It's too late. It's too late, Ben. It's too late.
Okay.
But thanks.
So you can find my podcast at anomaly.co.uk. But this is all about you guys tonight, and we met as far back as the Bet Sphere episode.
That's right. That's
series.
Right. Yeah. Why? And are you allowed to tell people what you retired from, or do you have to kill everybody if you do it?
No, I don't.
Yeah.
No, I can tell. So the reason I contacted you is because my little skill at behavioural detection. I used to be a cop, and I was working at Scotland Yard for years and years and years. So here I am now with a gorgeous Christmas jumper and a beer.
Yeah. So stand up so we can see it. Mandalorian.
So a Mandalorian Christmas jumper.
Very nice.
Amazing. I've got no pants on, so I couldn't stand all the way
up. No, okay, gotcha. Thank you for that.
On Zoom, never say stand up. So we can
especially to Paul Gledhill. So, Jim, how about you? I think everybody should know who you are. You're the OG. Without you, it's certainly not Forrest and I wouldn't be here. It's a true honor to have you back, as always, and to have you in our midst.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to be part of this every year. I look forward to it. It's part of my holiday festivities on my calendar. So glad to be here. Jim Harold, host of Jim Harold's Campfire and the Paranormal Podcast and some other shows. And the only thing I can say, for people of a certain age, you'll know what I'm talking about. I suspiciously feel like Paul Lynde right now.
Because you're in the middle?
Yeah.
But anyway,
if you could do an impression, I mean, I'll pay money for
it. No. But people of a certain age will know what I'm saying. We just need one more person at the bottom to make it perfect, and Peter Marshall hosting. But
Paul
thank you guys. So glad to be here. Looking forward to it. Oh, there you go.
Look at
there
that.
You go.
Holly backstage at the Hollywood Squares.
There you go.
Wow. We had that just like off to the side.
Yeah,
Rich has a book for most cultural references. He'll pull out a book for at least every second or third topic that somebody mentions.
First editions, signed first editions. All right, and Mr. Hanks, why don't you a little bit of background here from Mr. Micah Hanks joining us again this year.
Indeed.
What's going on?
It's good to be back first and foremost, and to see everybody, all the newcomers, and also, of course, those old Christmas chestnuts that keep rolling back from the fire. In recent years, I started very much as the anomalist, and I still am, but all of a sudden, I think my career has taken a turn for aerospace, defense, and science reporting with the debrief.org.
Yes.
And that's been commanding an awful lot of my time. But that, and of course, traveling around, speaking at events, all this year after the pandemic, it's so good to be able to get back out and talk about all these developments that Allison was talking about with the UAP we've been hearing about in recent years. A lot still happening in that sphere, but of course, I still love Sasquatch or his Christmas cousins, the Krampus, we all know, the Yeti, the Icy, stone giants, all the cryptid creatures, Christmas time. So it's a great to be able to get back to our roots and to enjoy some time together here in the holidays. And of course, I bought a beer, or I brought one at least for Paul, since I owed him one after not getting a Beatles reference in there last night, Paul. So yeah, I know, right. So good to see everybody here. Really looking forward to the evening.
That's awesome.
Micah, yeah, why don't you tell us, you had a guest appearance, albeit too briefly, on Howard Hughes' show in the UK. Can you tell us a little bit about what that episode was?
Oh, yeah. Well, first of all, it was with Howard Hughes, who has one of the very best voices in radio, in my opinion. An absolute crack-shot professional, cracking good. And, almost as good a voice, in my opinion, as the OG himself right here with that fancy microphone. Oh. The man, Jim Ho Harold.
Yes.
The studio, even at Christmas time, even looks a little spooky and strange like Halloween. But, Jim and I actually have a long podcasting history together, too.
Yes.
I think probably one of the very earliest interviews that I went on, if not Jim's show, was Howard Hughes. And he actually said I was one of his earliest interviews, too. So we must have started right around the same time. None of us started as early as Jim, is the thing,
That's right. Jim, how long have you been at it?
2005, I started.
Wow. Gosh. I
put the Geritol, spiked my Geritol with my eggnog.
I loved the Paranormal Report. That was my thing.
That was those guys.
Thank you.
Cleaning the classroom after a busy week and had to shovel out the guinea pig cage, I would turn that onto the smart board and I'd watch you guys talking about the latest move, and that would get me through all the not so pleasant parts.
That's very cool.
You're too sweet, and indeed, I enjoyed those days back in the day. Jim and I teaming up and having some fun. But again, that tradition very much continues right here. Back to your question, Forrest. Howard had me on talking about a sonic acoustic, sonic acoustic, same thing, an acoustic levitation technology that we reported on recently there at the debrief. Now, of course, the thing is I have to cover a lot of science, aerospace, defense, physics, astronomy. I love all that stuff. But I mean, you guys, you're like family, and so you know this, especially Jim. I'm a UFO guy through and through, right down to the core. I think Allison knows that too. And if I could spend more time just contributing dialogue to that subject, I probably would. But something else I love, and this is near and dear to Richard's heart as well. I got to share this really quickly. I was at CryptidCon this year.
Oh, yeah.
And look what I obtained from Mr. Easton Hawk, that remarkable, that's Allison, here we are. Yeah. That remarkable artist, Easton Hawk.
Oh,
this is some original Mothman art that he produced.
Wow.
And again, Easton, and there's so many great artists that attend that event every year. Jen and Jamie, my dear friends. Gosh, so many talented people. But anyway, again, I love that Fortean side of it too. And so far tonight, Jim's the only other one who's dropped the F word, Fortean.
I have too much eggnog. It's hard to tell what I'll do.
I hope we get into some of that too. All right, I'm done rambling. Go ahead.
And so, Rich, what are you up to? What are you working on these days?
Well, we just finished Titans season 4, so that's airing now on HBO Max.
Excellent.
And otherwise, I'm really just here to monitor Tessa's drinking.
Okay. Yes, so there's going to be some beverage. Yeah, what do we got going on here?
What is a can of Four Loco? What is this?
Bud Light seltzer. When water isn't enough.
The carbonation makes the intoxication effect faster.
You can't only buy your drinks at a gas station. I got to get you all the way to a supermarket, a liquor store, something.
Well, it's just so great to have everybody here, and I think we have a few things that we wanted to talk about, and we can go sort of freeform on this. It's been an interesting year. It's been an interesting year for us. I don't know really where to start. We've had I guess, for us, we're trying to get our business ready for the next year, the coming year, which is looking a little bit interesting economically. I don't know how things are going for other podcasters, but there's definitely some exciting things happening there that are a little unpredictable. But we've got some great topics that we're going to cover next year that we're real excited about. And we want to do more junk drawers, which are live like this, which we're hoping that all of you would come join us on when we do those. We do that for our patrons. But in this past year, looking back, I wonder if anyone has any stories of anything unusual. And I'm actually going to start with one. I'm going to start with something that happened to me just 3 weeks ago. And it's a bit strange, but I had a UFO sighting, and the craft that I saw was actually fairly close. So I'm just going to explain this. I was down at the beach at a family home that my aunt and uncle have. And I was outside bringing some stuff in from the car, and I looked up because I always look up since the show, probably a habit I got in about 3 or 4 years ago, thanks to all of you guys, listening to all of you all the time. And I looked up, and I saw a red light and a couple of white lights, and they weren't that high. They were maybe 1,000 feet, maybe 2,000 at the most, just quietly hovering. I mean, dead quiet. No drone fan, no buzzing, no nothing. And I was like, well, that's strange. But the first thing I thought was it must be drones. And I was with a friend who is an ex-National Guard guy and actually has some military background. And he was like, it's got to be military because there are some bases in North Carolina. There's weird stuff flying all over the skies in North Carolina. But it was really just not that high up. And as I was looking at it, I thought it was a single craft, and it had this red light and this white light. And then I thought it was a single craft. But then I saw when it started to move, I could see stars passing between the two light sources. And then it just slowly went away, still never made a noise. And then the two lights separated, and the red ones became way more defined. And the only way I can describe it is kind of like one of the UFOs at the end of Close Encounters, the little ones that had that looked like a jukebox. There was one that looked like a jukebox. That was what it had, long red bars on it. I'm a car guy, so I'm going to say it's kind of like an old 300ZX or something, like a long red flat bars that were out. And then they went off and they went into different directions. Never made a sound. Altitude wasn't that high. Since then, I've seen a like a Cessna at the same height. And I would say whatever their like low cruising altitude was about the same height. My friend was just like, it's got to be a military thing. It's got to be a military drone or something. But he also couldn't figure out why it didn't make any noise. We couldn't figure out why they went in different directions. And the lights on it, the character changed as it went out of sight. So I've never seen anything like that. I've seen UFOs, but they were always pinpoints of light, like stars that changed course very, very far away, that were obviously under some kind of control. This thing was like, I felt like if the daylight had been on, I would have been able to really make something out. So that was something that happened to me just about less than a month ago, which it was very strange. Yeah. So
did it feel weird? Did you have a weird feeling when you saw it, or were you?
Yes, I did actually. And I filmed it, but it's horrible. Like, I'm not even going to try and share it. I felt so bad because you're just like, oh, wait, I'm another person with a fuzzy, bad video. And I'm trying to hold the camera still. I tried to zoom in I've got a nice iPhone with the, 15 lenses on the back of it, but it still didn't look great. When I zoomed in, it didn't look great. So then I zoomed out and I kind of held it. But you can't tell anything. But what I can tell you is that they were not normal navigational lights like that you would see on an aircraft. That wasn't normal. But on the other hand, like I said, there's bases not far from us. There's actually a munitions base near this part of the beach where I was at that's heavily guarded. So they could be flying some kind of night sentry drone or something. But I mean, it was dead quiet. And there were two things, and it was weird how they were just hovering over, because where we were, there'd be no reason to be there. It's just a suburban, little beach cottages or whatever.
Did you sense that it? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say, I would challenge anyone who complains about the quality of UFO footage to film anything in the sky. Film an airplane the next time it flies by.
That's right.
Film anything that flies in the sky at any time of the day or night. Just grab out your iPhone and try to film it and see if it looks like the thing that it is, much less a thing you might not know what it is.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
It really isn't.
It's incredibly hard. So you were saying that you said something about bar. Was there a bar shape that you saw?
Yeah, the lights towards the end.
Just before
I was in a bar. No.
No.
I was not in a bar.
The shape.
But it was like a long tube of red light. I'm trying to think of something similar to compare it to.
Were the lights like within the bar? Like
it was solid.
Or it was like solid red bar.
Yeah, there was solid red bar and another red bar and a small red circle in the middle. Like it was a lot of lights, and that was as it got further away. And I don't know if they became visible because it was turning or something about its nature changed when it got further away.
Because something I saw in 2016 was also I would describe bar shaped.
Okay.
But I'm not saying this is the mothership or anything.
Right.
Because this was broad daylight. Actually driving to work at 7:20. I got to be there at 7:30. And I'm like, what is that thing in the sky above it seemed above the overpass, but I didn't know. It was hard to judge like how high it was and where exactly, it seemed like it was right above the overpass, but then the end of the sighting kind of contradicts that but it was two rectangular objects, and it looked like a gray bar with three white things in the middle. I think there were lights, but again, this is 7:20 in the morning, September 26th, 2016, and it was interesting because there was one up in the air, and then there was one to the side of the other one and lower, and they both looked exactly the same, and they just looked. There didn't seem to be any movement. It seemed like they were just hanging there, and so I tried, like you're driving and you're like trying to get your phone to take it, but it was not good because it was an expressway. There was just no way to do it and not die. And then I got off like right after that and looked back and then saw them higher up in the sky, but they seemed smaller. And I have no idea what that was. I mean, I've seen drones and other things. And again, I'm not saying this is the mothership. Maybe it was like, could have been some weird kite, or I don't know what it was. It's just like I've never seen anything like that. But it was bar shaped, so that's why I wanted to contribute that.
Oh yeah,
I would have given anything to have you as my 4th grade teacher. You were the teacher I needed in the 4th grade.
Well, actually,
Mrs. Jornlin, a UFO took my homework.
I'm like, completely understandable. It happens to everybody. Actually, that day, as soon as I got to class, I had a free write with the kids, and I'm like, something amazing just happened. And because I wanted to commit that into text before I forgot all the specifics, and then I shared, here's my free write about my extraordinary experience, and then I welcomed them. Well, share your extraordinary experience. So, we're always trying to come up with interesting prompts for the kids to write on.
That's so great. That's so great.
It is. That's what. So how about you, Rich? Have you had anything unusual happen this year, or what's your favorite latest book?
No, I got so many. Hey, I can show you. I will literally show you what I'm reading, but can I also say that these would make great stocking stuffers because it's a holiday show, and people are going to need.
Yeah.
Things. So Susan got me a few of these from my birthday. Okay. Have you ever seen these? These are these little books.
A visit.
And they're from a company called Biblioasis.
Oh no!
And what they are? These are ghost stories for Christmas. It says revive a spooky Christmas.
That's great.
Oh, those are very cool.
You see the time of ghost stories, and they've got a bunch of them with these really cool covers, and then these really fun illustrations on the inside, and they're all pretty short. They're just short stories, and some of them are by famous writers you've heard of, but they're through a company called Biblioasis.
I'm looking at it now. Yeah.
And you can get them, and literally you jam them right in a stocking. So I've been reading them. They're really fun. They're authors I don't know, and so I've been kind of digging on that. And then other than that, of course, I've been reading UFO books. Just and texting Rob Christopherson, who could not be with us today.
Yes, we did invite him. He was unable to attend, but yes, that's so okay. So that's cool. And have you procured any new first editions that we should know about?
Oh,
well, there we go.
What was the one last year? There was one somebody had. Scott, you had a first edition or something.
Yeah, I've got my best one. Oh, it's another bookcase.
Here's one that Scott and Forrest got me.
Oh yes,
for my birthday. Aboard a flying saucer, Truman Bethlehem.
Yes.
Signed.
Yes.
And, let's. Oh my.
Did you get your birthday card recently in the last few days ago?
Yes, I did.
Oh, very nice. And signed by
Truman Bethlehem. Yeah.
But look, the books of this era are great. I mean, even if they're not great books, even if it's been proven later that they're total bullshit, you still need the book. Look at this Flying Saucer from Mars.
Oh, okay.
This thing.
Okay.
By Cedric Allingham. It looks like it was published yesterday. This copy is so beautiful.
Yeah.
And it's actually from the year of our Lord, 1955.
Wow.
So this book is 65 years old.
Yeah.
And approximately. But just this era just produces the coolest looking books with the best covers. So, yeah, you don't need to read them. You just need to buy them and then just play them.
Yeah, right.
For no one, because no one comes over to my house to play with my books.
Well, so Jim, what about this past year for you? You talked to so many people. You've got so many. How many shows do you have on the air right now?
Well, I do the Paranormal Podcast, Jim Harold's Campfire. You Won't Believe What Happened to Me. Then I do a bunch of plus shows, kind of like you guys do your Patreon thing.
Yeah.
And a little bit of video here and there. So, and relaunching Crime Scene starting in January.
Okay.
Which I was stupid enough. I started a true crime podcast before Serial, but I put it behind a paywall, which was not smart business-wise. Made a little bit of a miscalculation. But nevertheless, just more of the same. I mean, a lot of great campfire stories. Would you want me to tell you a favorite campfire story?
Yeah. What's some of the? Some of the best stories I've ever heard are from your shows.
Well,
honestly.
I have one real Twilight Zone-y one, and maybe I could do that one later if that's okay. But this one. This was more, you said, one of the weirdest things. This didn't happen to me, obviously, but it did happen in my hometown. Somebody called up from the Cleveland, Ohio area, and we have a lot of big hospitals here. It's kind of one of the things we're known for. And she works at one of those big hospitals, and I believe she was a respiratory or is a respiratory therapist. And one day, she's working with this patient, and they have to transport this patient somewhere for a test of some sort. So there's a gentleman from transport and her were going down with him in this big, large freight elevator. So they get into the freight elevator, and the woman turns her face back out to the floor, out to the patient floor, and across the way is another elevator, which is like a passenger elevator. You can't fit a hospital bed into it. She looks up, she sees a group of people getting into the elevator, and they turn around, and there's a woman there who looks suspiciously like her. And she looks more closely, and she realizes that it is her. She's seeing herself. So that would be weird enough. So all day she's kind of puzzling over it. They take the patient down. They do with him whatever they need to do, bring him back. She continues to work. She just can't stop working because she saw a doppelganger of herself. So, it puzzled her all day. So at the end of the day, she's tired, tired from doing her job. Anybody that's worked in healthcare, bless them, that's a very tough road to hoe, tough work. She's standing by the passenger elevator with a group of other colleagues. She's getting in, and she turns around and looks out towards the patient floor. Across the way, there's a freight elevator, and she sees somebody with a hospital bed, a man and a woman, and the woman looks suspiciously like her, and it turns out that it is her. She sees her doppelganger the other way around. So essentially, she saw her own doppelganger twice in one day.
Oh, wow.
And,
that
again,
is a Twilight Zone.
Yeah. And the thing is that, to me, what does this person get out of calling my show and just making this up? They don't get any money for it.
Right.
They don't get any fame. I'm a mid-tier podcaster. It's not like their name is in lights. So why would somebody lie about that? And to me, when I've done the shows, as long as I have, I don't know what's going on. I'm convinced of two things. One, something is going on with all of these topics that we all cover. And the other thing is that the nature of our very existence is much weirder than we realize. In a lot of cases, the explanation is not A, B, or C. Sometimes it's D, all of the above. Yeah. So anyway, that's one of the weirder stories I heard this year.
That's a good one.
Yeah, I love it. And, did she say that anything portentous or anything notable had happened to her with regard to that?
Other than that absinthe that she had.
Well, I was thinking of my favorite paranormal author, Catherine Crowe. She's never far away from my mind. And in 1848, she wrote The Night Side of Nature, which is completely free online. Oh. And she was one of the first people to use the word doppelganger because she wrote this book in response to reading about all the incredible discoveries that German scientists and doctors were making in the early 1800s. And so she was the first one, according to Oxford English Dictionary, to use the word poltergeist and bring it into English language usage. She was one of those rare paranormal investigators that can read other languages. So she was reading a lot in German and in French, and she had to bring those discoveries into English language. So that's why she wrote this book. And so she has a lot of poltergeist stories in here. It's the first mention of poltergeist, but I think she might also be the first mention of the word doppelganger. There's a lot of doppelganger stories in here, and they usually portend someone's death, but not always. There's another phenomena like that, which I think is more Scandinavian derived, and it's not in this book, but I've heard about it elsewhere, called the Vartiger. And so the Vartiger is just something that comes, a part of you that comes when you're running around and your thoughts are on other things. Like I remember reading a story about a doctor. So, she was in a medical setting too, this person that you interviewed. So there was a doctor, and that might actually be in this book as well, but it's not referred to as a Vartiger. But this doctor would be running around having to see different patients, and he would oftentimes show up before he actually showed up. Like, he'd show up in the room, or he'd be talking to a colleague, and he wasn't actually there yet. And he got so freaked out about it that he forbade everybody in the hospital from mentioning that to him. But Vartigers are more like, you want to be somewhere else, and you still have to do other work, but a projection of you ends up getting home early or getting to a patient's bed early. So maybe that's more of what she was experiencing, because again, she's in a medical setting, so same kind of situation.
Could be.
So is this and this projection of the self that arrives before the physical self is recognized, and it interacts with other people,
right,
and is assumed to be the actual person. So when this doctor you're talking about would arrive on the scene, sorry, I'm late, they would say, well, you were just here.
Right, exactly like that. Or we just talked about that. Or, what do you mean you just got here?
Yeah, I just want to interject this, and I'll shut up. I had a story just like that, Allison. Very early on the campfire, this woman, I think they lived in a trailer, and her daughter, she had a high school daughter, and the school bus would drop her off almost in front of the house. So the one day, her daughter storms in. She starts cursing at her mother, a blue streak for nothing, just like cursing at her and angry with her. She storms down the hallway to her room and slams the door. Not a minute later, her daughter walks in the front door very casually, like, "Hi, Mom, how you doing today?" And she said, "Well, you were just here. You just cursed me out." She's like, "What are you talking about?" So that reminded me of that one of arriving before you arrive.
Right.
That reminded me very much of that.
Maybe she had that hidden, this anger, but it just, it had to explode out of her. Yeah, it's very weird, but that's a kind of a variety of doppelganger. And I think it was the Scandinavians that gave it the name Vartiger. So it doesn't have the same negative connotations as a doppelganger can sometimes have, which you see your doppelganger and that means you're soon to die. Or the fetch, it's called the fetch in Ireland. Yeah. So those are very negative connotations, but the Vartiger, no, not so. It's just you showing up because you're just that kind of type A person, type A plus person.
Right. And then the other people are like, wait, now, is this really you, or is this your projection? Because I don't,
Well, you're the only person I've ever heard who's brought up. I always thought it was called the Vardogger, but Vartiger is a much more elegant pronunciation.
I don't know if that's correct.
Well, it was something I read about years ago, and it played a part in Mothman prophecies, because that's what happens to John Klein. Before he gets to Point Pleasant, he's been seen in Point Pleasant. And it's
that's
like,
right.
all right, let's toss in a little Vartiger action in there.
Right, because that's in John Keel's book about people
Yeah.
saying, "Hey, you were just here. Why are you back again?" And he's like, "No, I wasn't."
There was that, and there was also a lot of people receiving phone calls from him that he never made. And he would show up places and they're like, well, you said you weren't coming. And, people hearing from him in various ways that he did not, he was not responsible for. So yeah, I love that. Boy, that is weird. That gets to a point where you don't even, you can't even begin to explain the reasoning behind any of it. It's like, wait, what? That's real glitch in the Matrix kind of stuff.
Well, it's
remember, Richard. Hey, you got to remember their motivations are not human.
One of my favorite lines.
And then, with the more humans I know, I prefer those motivations.
Yeah.
But it's also, you wonder about parallel universes and parallel realities,
many worlds,
slips and times where it's like that. We all exist on a certain vibration or frequency, and that drifts in. You go down between the hills, and suddenly you're not listening to talk radio. It's the 50 station that fades in, and then you come back out and between the hills, and it's just for that moment though you were listening to a different reality. And so I looked it up, and of course this is what's odd is I just punched in the terms Twilight Zone woman, and it finished. We'll finish the search, and it said woman on the horse. And so that Twilight episode is spur of the moment for you folks. It's episode 141, and the setup is that a woman is being chased by a woman on a horse. She doesn't know why, and not to give anything away, because Scott will yell at me, but he's never watching this, and this is it's not like it just came out last year. So basically the idea is that yeah, there you go. She's basically haunted by a version of herself that was older, telling her not to make the mistake she made 25 years ago. So in that case, it's not just an image that you don't know why, but there's a desperate kind of a feedback loop that's created because she wished she could go back and tell her young self not to make this mistake. And of course, she didn't know what was going on when she was younger. She just thinks she's being chased by a crazy lady on a horse, which turns out to be her. So yes, if you're interested in it, I think they took all of the Twilight Zones off of Netflix maybe last year, but which is a shame because they had all of them, and then you could watch the rarely seen season 4, which had the hour-long episodes.
Yeah,
which Rich
videotaped
Hatem
ones.
he likes to bag on them. So as Rich says, it's like it shouldn't be an hour. No, it's 30 minutes.
That's why I have it on Blu-ray.
Right.
One thing that I think's interesting, Jim, about the original story that has tangentized into all these wonderful other side stories is there is actually something that I learned in school, a book that's always stuck with me by Marshall McLuhan called Understanding Media, the Extension of Man, which is a very bloviated title, but there is the first line, or the first chapter is called "The Medium is the Message." And
Yep.
it's more of a focus that like maybe the individual is not the unique person, but the hospital. So like even Forrest mentioning vibrations and all these comings and goings of energy, maybe it was bound to happen if you spend enough time in a hospital.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That's a
it's a lot of it's just funny how different people have different perceptions of what a place is supposed to be haunted or not, and they always think of course with cultural representation in popular media, you only think that hauntings can happen in spooky old abandoned Victorian houses. I bring this up a lot, but I remember Jimmy Kimmel asking some of his guests, like, well, do you believe in ghosts? Especially, if their character involved a movie with one. He says, well, here's why I don't believe it, because, hospitals, people are dying in hospitals all the time. It should be chock full of ghosts. And what he doesn't realize is that, yes, they are. And it doesn't have to be an old hospital. It's just, there's a lot of just human emotion and imprinting going on. And if you talk to anybody who's worked there for quite a while, you will get some pretty good stories. And I have one. I don't know if I should read this now, maybe wait on it. I'll defer to Scott on that. But we had a pretty good one come in that for our Halloween stories episodes, we did a 3-parter and asked for people's stories. And this one, it wasn't so much scary, but we wanted to hang on to it because it is kind of heartwarming. It involves a subject that a lot of folks here are, very interested in, and that is the near-death experience. But also,
it's Rich's favorite.
It is one of his favorites.
Mine too.
Well, I don't know. Do you want? Should Scott? Should I read that?
Yeah,
email
go ahead,
now, or
read
should we
it. Read
save
it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, this came in again, as I said, in our batch of Halloween stories, and I think we'll still do something with this. We never have met this person, but they sent another batch of stories. I think last year. Here's your coincidence for our Christmas call for stories, for heartwarming Christmas tales. And she had one. I'm not sure if we read that one then, if it made it, but she had a kind of a heartwarming one where this woman's a nurse, her husband's a doctor. So right there, it's like they have some knowledge of what happens when a person legally passes physiologically. And she got a call from her on the cell phone from her recently deceased father, who could also speak French. And she picks up the phone in the middle of the night, just rings, and it's her father's voice saying, "Je t'aime, I love you," several times. And she's like, "Wait, it sounds like Dad. It can't be my dad. He just recently passed." And then the voice just kind of fades out. Talk about another Twilight Zone. And just kind of crackles away, and the call drops. And it's the middle of the night, but her husband remembers getting the call. And of course, I don't think it showed up in the call log. So it's just one of those calls from beyond, which is another topic we all love. So anyway, that was the first story she sent in, coincidentally, for our Christmas stories. This one was for Halloween. So before I read this, she puts a preface on as well. There's a bit of a trigger warning, and then it involves death and stillbirth. But I think once you hear it, it's you'll find it hopeful. But if those concepts or ideas upset you, you may want to tune out. But it's not that bad, at least according to me. So she starts off saying she'd previously written in. She has been graduated from university for 20 years now, and she's had some pretty astounding paranormal events, both in her professional and private life. But the one that she's going to tell here is the very first one that she experienced in the early 2000s. So this person wants to go by the name Sally, so that's how we'll refer to her. She says she was a team leader on an afternoon shift in a general medical ward where she worked. This was quiet during the afternoon shift of about 14 and let's see, in military time here and another country. So about 2:45 p.m. to about 11 p.m. And she says she's had a couple of hours before the end of her shift. And at that time, most patients had settled down for the night and everything was relatively quiet. And she had recently become a nursing graduate, or she had a nursing graduate on the team with them. And he came up to her and he said that he was, quote, unable to get a blood pressure on bed 16. And she asked him if he was unable to get a blood pressure because he didn't know how, or if the blood pressure wasn't registering in the Sphygmo, which is a blood pressure machine. And he replied that it wasn't registering. And she said she immediately knew something was amiss, and she ran into the patient's room, and she saw her gray face on the patient and pressed the code blue alarm button at the same time. So now this is her in her words. The Code Blue team came straight to us, and happily she was resuscitated. 2 days later, one of the team from the ICU popped into the ward and told me Mrs. X wants to see you. She was sitting up in bed and still monitored, but extubated and smiling and happy. And she said, "Oh, I wanted to see you because I saw what you did for me." And Sally was a bit taken aback, and she asked, "Well, what did I do?" And the woman said, "When you pulled me back," she said. We talked for a couple of minutes, and that's when I heard from her chilled me. She said that she knew something strange was going on because she opened her eyes and she found that she was floating near the ceiling of her hospital room. She said she saw me rush into her room and punch the code blue button above her bed head and start performing CPR on her. She described the code team coming in, applying defibrillation pads, shocking her, fluid resuscitating her, bagging, intubating, etc., etc. I merely listened, and I didn't feed her any information regarding what had or had not been done to her during the resuscitation process. Then she said, "Oh, that nice doctor who was all dressed in green, he has a very sweet spot for you. But he has a bald patch at the top of his head. I laughed and asked Dr. X, who I knew who he was, as I had spoken to him on the odd occasion. She continued, yes, he's quite handsome, but that bald spot of his has distracted me quite a bit when I was up there watching. Honestly, I am 5'3". This is Stanley talking now. And this doc was around 6 feet. So there wasn't any way this tiny nurse had seen the top of his head, or in fact, how this little old lady lying in her hospital bed had seen that bald spot. She then started to tell me about having no pain or fear, and that, quote, the people above the ceiling were asking her to go back because she knew she was being hasty trying to come and stay with them. When I asked her if she wanted to come back to Earth, or for want of a better word, she said, oh, I don't mind. I didn't mind. I know it's there now, and I am certain it's going to be fantastic. So I'm ready when they are. This lady went home from the hospital happier than I'd previously seen her. She seemed to have a new bounce to her step, and despite being 78 plus years, I thought she looked more vibrant and lively since her resuscitation. I hope she found those people above the ceiling. So then it goes on. There's a couple more interesting anecdotes here, very short though. After that day, I experienced a lot more paranormal events. Number one, same hospital, different floor. This housed the executive and administration staff of the hospital. No one would go to that floor during the night because of the terrible atmosphere. The security guards had to attend the floor, but they'd go in pairs because of the strange happenings. The doors would slam by themselves, and you could hear newborn cries echoing in the empty corridors. The elevators worked perfectly during the day, but security always had lots of trouble moving from that floor after their rounds. The elevator always seemed to want to stay there. The history of the hospital isn't dark or mysterious, but rumor has it that an indigenous woman lost her newborn baby when that floor was a maternity ward, and she'd put a curse on the hospital. Soon after this, the hospital lost its maternity services. Anecdote number two, a 104-year-old man who had his 2 spinster daughters beside his hospital bed for days. He'd been unconscious all that time. When I arrived for my morning shift, I asked the ladies if they would like to go have a cup of coffee or tea. They decided to leave the room and go to the visitors cafe. When they had walked out of his room, the old man opened his eyes, smiled, and watched them leave. And then he took his last breath. Number three, and this is the one where it could be kind of sensitive for some. Number three, I also worked in an operating theater specifically for emergency cesarean section births. During one particularly tragic birth, the baby was unable to be resuscitated after being delivered by emergency C-section. I was walking out of the operating room, and I looked down the corridor about 20 feet away from me, and I saw a young woman holding a baby. And I thought, oh, who's that? Not in scrubs? Who let her in? All those thoughts shot through my mind as I started walking towards this intruder. She smiled at me and said, don't worry, I'm taking her home to see everyone. Then she faded before my eyes. The stillborn was a baby girl. So there you go. And she says, out of all the things that happen in hospitals that appear to be paranormal, I have one more thing to add. One hears stories about empty hospital rooms having the bell go off when no one is in the room. My colleagues and I have experienced this more than once. Paranormal? Well, not for us. If a call bell isn't properly plugged into the wall socket or falls out, the call bell will ring automatically. It's a fail-safe method to ensure call bells are attached properly. If they're not, the bell will sound the alarm to alert the staff to repair or attend. So there you go.
Wow.
Thoughts?
It's a great series of events. It's great stories. I mean, and you have to think that for all the ones we hear, how many there are that you never hear, that nobody ever tells, they don't share, they don't email it to somebody like us or whatever. There's a lot going on out there. And it's interesting to me how skeptical people are when they listen to the show. They just think because there's not exposed to it more that maybe it's not there, but it's not. This is a weird parallel, but I was looking at yesterday. My wife just had on the TV. She had the John Taffer on, the bar rescue show. I don't know if anybody's ever seen that, but it's just like really loud, aggressive guy who saves bars that are going out of business. But one of the things that he's like, "Oh, I can't believe you're doing this. I should shut you down now." Whatever, all that stuff. But one of the things that he said to this bar, they were like, "Well, we haven't had a lot of complaints." Was he said 7.5 out of 10 people don't complain. They just don't come back. And that's like a statistic that he knows because he's been doing that for 30 years. And that's the statistic. Like, we don't have a bar, but like I always wonder about the stories that, that Jim tells and that sometimes we tell on our show. And it's like, how many out there, how many people aren't sharing them or aren't going to bother to share them, or something happens and they don't think about it. And it's funny too, because Forrest and I have also talked about what we call paranormal apathy, which is like right after this event, you stop thinking about it, you just go back to your regular life, or you go back to sleep, or you go back to what it's like, what is that? I don't know what that is either. And when I was talking about the UFO story from earlier, I found myself just in the next hour, I was like, I should be really way more freaked out. And then I was like, what's for dinner? You're just like, okay, wait, was this an earth-shattering moment? Well, I don't know. It's gone. I can't do anything about it now. It was really bizarre. What's for dinner? And then the next day you're thinking about it. And the only reason I thought about it more is because what we do. But it's strange. That's when what is it? Forrest, in the man who sees UFOs, was that it, or the
Christopher? Let's see, it's
documentary
with
the people on the beach, like the young couple sitting on the wall at the beach, and there's like a UFO and like a really obvious thing.
Oh, it's it's above the horizon, and Christopher Rapolo, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
Is the gentleman's name. It's a terrific. And here's the thing. I'll just say this about some of these documentaries, and that it was the other one is Jim is trying to contact aliens. Is that a lot of these stories, and Rich will attest, is that there's some weird stuff going on, perhaps, or it's just somebody trying to find weird stuff, but more so, it's a story about the people involved in these searches or quests or these strange things that happen to them. It's really as much about a story, not about these strange incidents, but the person themselves as a human being and a personality, and how do they reconcile this with people who don't see this stuff. So anyway, it's that documentary is fascinating. It's very touching as well. But to Scott's point is that there's a couple that they look like they're on a date having ice cream. They're like, you see that light there bouncing up and down on the horizon? Like, it's not the sun. They're like, yeah, it's kind of weird. Yeah. And then they go back to eating their ice cream because, like, well, how do you process that? The one that when you take it to a little further, I mean, we've had John E.L. Tenney tell us when we interviewed him, it's like, oh yeah, he's seen something weird in the sky. There's a group of people standing at the crosswalk ready to cross. Like, hey, you see that? And they're like, no. And it's like, and some of them will get mad. That's what's interesting too. It's just like, I don't want to hear this. Do not ruin my day with anything that's outside of stuff I can handle. It just inspires a lot of anger, and for different reasons, as we said. Let's see, Dave Davis in Wales, who said, he was mentioning his story that he experienced, and somebody in a bar punched him out. Now, maybe that's just a Welsh greeting, but he said that it's also like, don't taint our community with your crazy talk, Buster. They're going to take it very seriously, but yeah, there's a bunch of levels where people they don't want to deal with this. And
well, there's people there are people who have the experience and don't want to think about it because of the feelings that it brings up. There's people who have had UFO abduction experiences who when the memory comes back also recall being told not to remember, or that you will not remember, or you should not remember. And they have a lot of apprehension about that. I just read The Interrupted Journey. I'd never read it. The John Fuller book from back in the 60s about Betty and Barney Hill. And there was a lot of that. And also a lot of discussion about how they felt about their experience and how that sort of paranormal apathy presented, especially for Barney, who just on a deep level did not want to deal with it within himself, much less the larger world. And then with the near-death experience, I've heard stories where people avoid talking about it because they feel tremendous guilt, because when they are where they go, they don't want to come back, and they don't care about their husband or wife or their children.
Yeah.
And when they come back, they struggle with those feelings of, whoa, I was so ready to give up my life and go on to the next thing. And it takes them a while sometimes to sort of process those feelings. Sometimes they do speak of it right away to hospital personnel who dismiss it.
Well,
And
it's Richard Dreyfuss in Close Encounters. He basically just
Yep.
leaves Terry Garr and his 3 kids, and he's ready to go off. And he comes
Well,
back, and
they
he's
leave him.
aged 6 months. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, it's difficult. This is not something that people, oh, I saw a shadow. Oh my gosh, I saw a ghost. Oh, I'm going to go on television. Oh, I'm going to write a best-selling book. That does not happen unless you're reading the Skeptical Inquirer, in which case apparently it happens all the time.
Right.
It doesn't happen.
Right.
Okay. And the times it's happened, we all know about it. And we all
Yeah.
know it's fake.
Yeah.
I hate to ruin anyone's Christmas, but Amityville is fake.
No. Thrown down
Well,
the gauntlet.
But here's my other angle on that. It's like when people, like I said, it's popular as more and more people start to discuss the paranormal. You see these tropes being discussed, and it's like, okay, it's easy to dismiss this angle, whether it's like, oh, we've heard this so many times before. Now we know that this is not true, kind of an angle. In that the Amityville, it's like if you have one thing going on, and again, I was referred to it with the Patterson Gimlin thing, is that, or as we said, Jose Chung, the great X-Files episode, is that there could be multiple things going on. Like you said, if there's paranormal apathy, perhaps it's a programming not to remember it, but also your own subconscious reaction to it to keep yourself in your own sanity. And then there could be multiple things going on. So what I was going to say is that at that house, yes, the one family could have been making that up to get out of the house, whatever reason that's mundane, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's not haunted. And that's my thing, is that it's like the Patterson Gimlin film. Yes, he could have been in the middle with a guy in a suit off camera, and he's got his Kodak K100 shooting 16 millimeter film at the creek, and then a real Bigfoot walks in. They're not mutually exclusive. So, like I said, there could, and there's several levels, and I think that also adds to why it's hard to research some of these things. I think there could be multiple true things happening at once that it's hard for us to parse because we have no puzzle pieces to figure out here. We only see one really weird thing happen, but there could be multiple levels to it. So,
a minute ago, Jim was talking about how the world is stranger than it appears on the surface. And we spend a lot of our time in the supernatural ghetto, digging through boxes and stories and knocking on doors. But for everyone who isn't us, they hear this stuff and they're like, well, yeah, I don't know, maybe, except didn't happen to me and doesn't really affect my life. And it does sort of beg the question that if it does happen, why doesn't it happen more to more people? There are a lot of people who have an open mind and like to hear stories and will believe it, who have had no experiences. But I wonder why phenomena only sort of reveals itself to, I don't know, a smaller portion of our world.
And maybe it's happening to a lot more people. Like you guys were saying before, this is just so fascinating to me because I've, pondered this myself about some of my own experiences that kind of just went under the rug. And then years later, you're lucky that you're triggered and you're like, wait a second. And I'm all about it. But I think when it doesn't match your day-to-day, it's kind of an algorithmic response. Oh, that doesn't fit, does not compute. And then you just go, time to go back to work.
You explain it away.
Well, or it just, you forget about it. I mean, I've had my husband, this is going to be very brief, but he's a photographer. He went to this old abandoned drive-in theater, taking all these arty architectural pictures, and then he just he's in the screen, he stumbles out of the screen, he's not paying attention to anything, and as he walks out, he sees all these people surrounding the area in black robes, and they're banging the heck out of this old car. And he's like, whoa, and he just backs away and then gets the heck out of there. And some people are driving in and they give him this look, like when he's going out, they give him the look. And he's like, whoa, what did I just stumble into here? And I was at one of those boring baby showers that we're all obligated to go to as women. And he told me this after. he picked me up, and that should have just, I am always looking to be just popped out of the mundane. Please, God, help me. And he gives me this story, and I'm like, oh my God, that's incredible. And then, you know what? We're just like, forgot all about it. It was a Sunday, had to go back to work on Monday, forgot about it for years. And then we're watching this TV. This is not paranormal. That's why I'm using it to explain kind of a similar thing. We're watching this movie on a Saturday night years later, and I've already fallen asleep on the floor. And then Scott like jumps off the couch and he goes, oh my God, I was there. And it was an American movie, which was this famous movie made about another movie called Coven.
Coven, yes.
Not Coven.
That was put together by Mark Borchard, who was a Milwaukeean. And that was the filming of a crucial scene that they happened to flash at American Movie. And but I was so ashamed of myself because then it all came flooding back.
Look at that.
He was it.
Coven.
Then it all came flooding back. And, yes, Coven. Yes, that's how we pronounce it in Milwaukee, apparently. So, but that was so shocking to me as a teaching moment for myself, where I was like, whoa, you are all about this. I'm ashamed of you. You didn't even make a call to the police or... you didn't even
thought it was a cult of people that hated 1984.
You didn't even go like, well, we got to go there next weekend when we don't have a stupid baby shower to go to. So it just kind of shows that wasn't paranormal, but it shows how when something doesn't fit into the little box, it just like is forgotten about. So I'm true, and I'm all about it. So you would think other people they don't like it, they're not all about it, and things happen, and maybe it just goes under the rug because they have that everydayness, that the banal, the mundane life that really is. But what I find disturbing about what Forrest said is the judgment, not only coming from social media, but from some spirit floating above you looking at your bald spot. Come on, everybody's a critic, even if they're having an out-of-body experience.
This story is brought to you by Rogaine.
It's the
you don't think they're watching in the bathroom? I beg to differ.
I think it's when you come back, you mention it. Like if you pass on, that becomes your spiritual apathy, your human apathy. Like, I really don't care to see anybody naked anymore. It's just like you're moving on. But if you come back from there, then you still have those human tendencies. Is like, that bald spot distracted me a bit. It's like I can't see that being a big deal unless you've moved on. But you do hear about all these spirits who they're still angry about something. They want their story to be told. It's a little bit like the Duffy brothers case the Watsons, the Watson brothers, the brothers Watson, as we've come to. It's really two terrific.
It's our most recent 2 episodes.
It's our most recent about
folks that don't know.
About the 57 Irish immigrants.
Right.
Who were looks like at least a few of them were met with murder and in 1835 while working on this stretch of the railroad, and how many coincidences happen for them wanting their story. It seems to be finally be told and exposed so they can maybe get some peace. And just a brief coincidences before we go on, and maybe we'll do this a little bit later. I think next we're going to talk to Gled about his big cat updates, where there should not be big cats. But while I was driving home
in his lap, I saw it like 10 minutes ago.
I know the cat is photobombing once.
It just proves they exist. There's no problem.
Just cat. We got it. They're the best proof I've ever seen.
Job done. I'm off.
Patterson Gimlin film. Move away.
It's just a cat that's the size of a German Shepherd, I think.
Please, that's a child in a cat suit.
Right. with
quadrupedal child, no doubt.
Just quickly before we passed, my coincidence is we just had wrapped up an interview with the two gentlemen who also are professional bagpipers. And they'll play at events and different gatherings. And while I was driving home here in Glendale on Brand Boulevard, for those that know, there's the Alex Theater. And I look over and there's a bagpiper on the sidewalk. just a lone bagpiper. And it's like, well, that's a bit of a coincidence. And then, of course, this is a bit of how you want to take this, like what Allison says. It's like if you want to let it lie as something unusual, uncanny, and meaningful in that sense, or if you want to drill down and investigate and ruin all the magic. I look up, it's like, oh, it's the opening night of Brigadoon. That's why there's a bagpiper there. But also that's what synchronicity is. It's two unrelated
it's like you
things
left
having a third maybe
from doing that. You're on your way home, and then there's a bagpipe. Now, are you seeing the bagpiper because you're thinking about bagpipes, and you wouldn't have thought about it at all or even regarded it? But I would say, being a former resident of LA where you live, I would notice the bagpiper no matter what was happening if I was driving home.
It's
LA.
not common, and that's the thing is like, if you're in a city with a heavy Irish history to it, Boston.
Yeah, it's a different
certainly
thing.
You might see more of that. And this is kind of leading into what Gled's going to talk about, is that it was still a coincidence. You can just dismiss it like, oh, well, it's just, they just hired a guy because they're drumming up a little excitement for the opening night of their production of Brigadoon. But at the same time, it's just like, I just got talking to two guys who actually composed bagpipe tributes to the Fallen 57. And we listened to a little bit of that. We're talking about it. And then there it is. And so that's the synchronicity, is that it has from those two separate incidents that really have no connection, there's a bit of connection and meaning to me now. And like, that's the world I choose to live in. So now talking about, though, things that should not be there, not very common, especially in southern England, or I guess anywhere in the UK, is a large.
I am meant to be here. I promise you.
There you go.
Yeah, you're meant to be there. Yes.
Well, there was something that I was thinking about, something that Rich said earlier on about emotions, and emotions reminded me of something that had happened a few years ago. So I go slightly off topic here, but I guess I kind of remember talking to you on one of the Junk Drawer episodes about this, about 999 calls that came into the control room. So over there, you guys have 911 and we have 999, and we had this emotionally charged dropped 999 call almost on a weekly basis from a house that had burnt down. And most of the children in the family were killed in that fire. And the telecoms company was saying, well, this shouldn't happen. This call shouldn't be coming in. The line had been cut off and everything, and the house was no longer there. But that call came in on a weekly basis. It definitely happened.
Wow. When there was somebody on the call, a voice?
Oh, we'd pick it up.
Yeah.
I was in the control room once when one of those calls came in, and the computer system automatically tells you where the subscriber is. And it went back to that address. Nobody, if you called it back, it was just a dead number.
But when you picked it up, was there talking, or it's just
no, just completely dead.
Oh my God!
Wow. Yeah, nobody there, and it had to be looked into, because there's a service level of response to dropped calls, because anything could be happening. And it's crazy thing. Where were we? So UFO sighting. I had a UFO sighting this year.
Okay.
And I was with my co-host Steve. He's in the chat tonight, so he'll be able to attest to this. And we were up in Yorkshire visiting with Paul Sinclair, and we were on the cliff tops at Bempton. And you know how it is where you have an area with no light pollution, and you can look up and you can spot satellites coming over, and they move at a really good lick through the sky, and you can only just work them out. They're a pinpoint of light. But we had one like that, and I was very happy with this light traveling from west to east out over the North Sea, that this was going to be a satellite. But once it got directly over us, it started to tumble slightly in the way that it was moving, and it ended up veering off at about 60 degrees towards south, which is not the behavior of a satellite, I'm sure. I mean, Micah might be able to assist with that one, but certainly back in my RAF days before I joined the police, I'd never seen anything like that. So yeah, bizarre. But big cats in the UK, it's a big thing. Since COVID, I mean, we've had sightings of big black leopardy type cats in the UK for the last 30, 40 years. And I was chatting to, in fact, another friend Micah's got, Rick Minter, who I know. Rick's a top guy. And, we were discussing this in, I think it was the last episode of my podcast. And I was out helping Rick put some cameras in as we're investigating a site just outside of London where deer are being taken. And at sort of the same time every year, the carcasses of these deer are turning up, and that they've been stripped right to the bone. And there are tooth pits on the rib cages of the animals, etc. So there's plenty of good footage of these things. But I had my own sighting back on August 16th, I think, 2020, and I was absolutely blown away by this. And
that's the date. That's the exact date you got, because I have these
August
files
16th.
Yeah, August 16th, 2020. Yeah.
So I was at the top of a hill near where I live. I'm an amateur radio operator. I enjoy all that stuff. And it's nice to get away from all the electrical interference. So get up the top of the hill, and I'm adjusting the antenna on top of my car. And it's just coming up to dusk. And this black cat comes off from the right-hand side, walking across the freshly harvested field to my left-hand side. And this thing was just all muscle. It was just amazing. And they're not native to the UK. And they're not paranormal either, but they're not supposed to be here. And I guess the thing about these is that so many people feel that they don't exist. It's just not enough people have seen them. But this one, and I know the mechanic's got a couple of live footage. So this is one of the pictures of it sitting down. It actually turned around to face me at one stage, and my blood ran cold. But there's a couple there which really will show the feline. There you go.
Oh, wow.
I mean, to give you an idea, this thing was the size of a Labrador. And it was longer than a Labrador, probably half as long again. And the next day, I went out into that field, worked it out. It was about 50 to 60 paces from where I'd been standing. So at the time that I saw it, I was quite happy that I'd probably have been able to get back in the car. But I kept an eye on this thing for the best part of 20 minutes. And at that time, I just started phoning everybody. And I got on the phone to Paul Sinclair and said, look, you are not going to believe what I'm seeing right now. And he's very blunt, is Paul. And he says, well, what are you seeing? And I said, I've got a black cat. He says, well, what are you bloody doing talking to me on the phone? You want to film it? and he was right. So I managed to take quite a lot of photos. And the best part about the iPhone, I guess, is that even though the video wasn't overly great, the live photo on the iPhone was able to create those little snippets of footage. But yeah, this thing was amazing. And there are various reasons.
Didn't you take a bucket out in the field? Or didn't you do a scale experiment?
I did, yeah. I did it the next day. Worked out. In fact, you might even have the photos of that. But I took a measure and a barrel out into the field, put it down, worked out roughly the height of this thing, and the length, and it was easily the height of a Labrador. I mean, this thing was just so beautiful, though. It's a killer, it's an apex predator, but it was absolutely stunning. And
I know, like, I always hear those stories coming out of the UK, ones of the black cats. I'm in Pasadena. Those pictures were amazing. I've got this thing. This showed up in my bedroom.
Yeah.
And it just you can sort of see it. It's not great. You can sort of get the impression that it's a cat.
Look, Rich, that's a devil cat. Those are paranormal, truly paranormal. Those are devil cats. Beware, stay away. Don't trust them. Don't give them anything to eat ever. All right, they're going to take anything they want to eat anyway.
I was more concerned by the carpet.
Bad feeling off this one. A real bad feeling.
Trust your gut, buddy.
Well, you'll see some evidence if you go on vacation and something turns up on your pillow. as sometimes happens.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Micah, did you have something you wanted to share with us, or is Paul? Are you done, or is there an update with what happened? Was there some new big cat?
Yeah, there been any more
information?
sightings lately? Or?
Yeah, there have been loads. And
Yeah.
the point I was going to make was that even though there had been sightings over the last 20, 30 years, and the reasons for them being here are numerous. People had them in private menageries, and when the law changed in 76, they were released. Also, there were some American Air Force stations here where they kept them as mascots, and they released them as well, rather than taking them back to the States. So, we think there's a breeding population of perhaps 200 to 300 in the UK.
Oh, that's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot, especially if they're in your bedroom. Hey, Rich. And
there's a breeding population of animals in my house. I will say that.
we kind of knew that, but we just didn't want to say. So I guess
I'm going to release them.
But for you guys, I mean, where you are around Pasadena, I guess over where you are, Forrest, as well, you've got those animals native there.
Well, there's. It's funny you mentioned that, Glad, is that my good friend of ours is that in my neighborhood of Los Feliz, we have a famous one. We've mentioned him on the show, but he is a cougar that his moniker is P22. I'm going to guess somebody else would know that. It's for panther or puma, but he's got a radio collar. But recently he's been coming down out of Griffith Park and walking around. But also he's attacked several people's pets, smaller dogs usually, and I think killing a couple. Wow. So he was he needs to be. Well, they just captured him. So this is just a article that appeared in the LA Times where I think he's been captured finally. And of course, unbeknownst to him, he's like the Men in Black. They know exactly where you are. So he was darted, I think, and they're going to just take him further into the hills or someplace where he can't get in trouble, because there's also a risk that he could get hit by a car. That's happened. With some of the freeway crossings. So
I think somebody was telling me that he's getting on in years now, and he's
Paul, you said that there have been like some deer that have been attacked.
Yeah, so the deer that we have predominantly in this part of the UK are muntjac deer. They're not very big, but they can easily be taken down by one of these. And there's some footage and eyewitness testimony of a cat going across a field after a deer and taking it out. It was over the last year, I think.
But they can tell by the remains what the predator was, right?
Yeah, they can. They can do tooth pit analysis. Now, the reason for myself and Rick putting out the cameras are to try and get, obviously, video footage of these animals as they're walking through, but also the area where the carcasses were found last summer. We're hoping that they're creatures of habit and come back round this way and then take the deer in the same place.
Right.
So,
there's rhyme and reason to predator behavior. Yeah. There's evidence, teeth marks, as you pointed out. I only bring it up because it brings us back to cattle mutilations, which have been going on for decades and do not fit these patterns at all.
No, that's right. Completely different. I mean, Paul Sinclair investigated some mutilations on sheep, and I think maybe some goats too, up in Yorkshire, and it just stopped one day, and it's all very bizarre. But there was a whole spate of them, and I think the farmer lost about 15 sheep.
Wow! Just quickly, something I'd heard. It's funny. If you pay attention and you're careful with your data and recognize connections, this is something that was on 60 Minutes, and they were talking about predation by mountain lions and different other apex predators. And this is somebody who is a veterinary expert and forensic doctor and veterinarian on these animals. And something that interesting she said is like, well, how can you tell when you come across a carcass and that it's been it's been attacked and partially eaten by a natural predator? She says, well, if once you peel the skin back, you'll start to see in the subderma and the tissues underneath, is that because of the tremendous bite pressure of these animals, is that there'll be a lot of bruising.
Yeah.
And she said that's how you tell that something's been, gnawing on this thing and trying to get a meal. But it's not something you see in a lot of these, mutilation cases. Is that there's no bruising, there's no tearing of the flesh. It's all very weirdly precise,
They're
or
bloodless,
it's like a pinking
aren't they?
shear.
Most of them are bloodless.
Yeah.
A lot of them are, and so is that natural and just something we don't know? Somebody that was on Jim's show a long time ago, and I listened intently, but Jim interviewed Gabe Valdez, who's
Yes.
he wrote the book, especially for the area of Dulce base and all the mutilations going on there. Gabe's father was a law enforcement officer in the area for a long time and was documenting this. So Gabe took an interest, and then he became law enforcement. I think after he retired, Jim, he wrote this book and investigated a lot of cases. If I remember your interview correctly.
That's my recollection, although it becomes a blur after a while, but yes, that's my recollection.
Yeah, you've got so many more hundreds of shows, thousands of shows under your belt. But what I remember is because I think I was out for a walk at the time, like, okay, come on, let's get to the conclusion. What's going on here as we do with all this? And I think his conclusion was like, well, essentially, there might be out of 100 cases or 100% of the cases, we think 90, 94, 96% can, they're weird, but they can be explained. Right. It's probably like, missing 411. However, there's always that 4 to 6%, which are so weird. We have no explanation. And that's the white crow theory, is that, if you have 4 to 6%, which go beyond any medical scientific explanation, then it leaves open the door for possibility that it is something not natural. Mm-hmm. And so, anyway, it's like with everything else. It's like you hear, what you boil it down, people say like, well, most of these can be explained. Most Bigfoot sightings are upright walking bears, but not all of them.
Right.
And so,
4 to 6%.
Yeah.
What's the percentage of people who report supernatural occurrences in their life? Probably about 4 to 6%.
Right.
There's probably a bunch who have like something a little bit weird, and then there's the ones who have had alien abduction, near-death experience, something really dramatic that you can look at and go, well, that one, you can sort out for 100 years. You're never going to have a really good answer.
I interviewed Dr. Michael Shermer about. I'm sorry, Allison. I'll just finish this. I interviewed Dr. Michael Shermer, who's probably the best known skeptic other than James Randi, the late James Randi. And actually, Shermer was a real gentleman. I mean, I disagreed with him about things, but he was open to discussing, which I really appreciated. And I said, well, Dr. Shermer, let's say almost exactly what Forrest was saying. Let's say I agree with you in 93, 94% of the cases that things can be explained, whether we're talking about ghosts or UFOs or all this Forteana stuff. What about that extra few percent? She said, oh, we know all about that. We just put that up on the shelf. And it's like, wait a minute. No, take that off the shelf. Don't put that up there. Let's take that off and let's examine that, because that's what's interesting.
Right.
Jim, that's one of my favorite quotes. Yeah. Because I heard that interview and I use it all the time. It's like, we have a 10% we have no idea about, so we're not even going to look at that. Like, that's the part you should be looking at. But I also get it that you have no tools. Yeah. You're going to have to get out of your box. Like to do that.
He uses 94% of the buffalo, and we use the other 6% of the buffalo.
What I don't understand is why these big cats, ABCs, like, why are they even controversial? Because like here in Milwaukee, we actually have, well, not often, but there have been cougars that live in Wisconsin. And in 2015, there was a cougar that got into the Milwaukee area. And so my husband likes to take walks at night. And so at that time, 2015, I was like, watch out for the Milwaukee lion. And I was just joking. And then the next day, I was looking at a community forum from our neighborhood. And there were sightings like a block away.
Oh my God.
And I was like, what? But my point is, we know that these cougars like exist, but like the DNR, the Department of Natural Resources in our state, has such a problem with the idea when people report melanistic or black cougars.
Yeah.
And I don't understand why this is such a sticking point for people. We know that other animals have melanism.
Right.
Isn't it possible that cougars would have melanism? And so some skepticism is just ridiculous. It reminds me of a critical thinking class I took in college way back when. My professor was a journalist who he shared with us an argument he got in with his editor about whether or not there were coyotes in Wisconsin. And, you know, the professor was like, well, I have reports, you know, from witnesses that there's that there's coyotes. And he says, absolutely not. There are not coyotes. And now, you know, I see coyotes in my backyard, like not all the time, but you know, this is within the city limits.
Yeah.
But it just shows you how narrow-minded people can be. I mean, I understand skepticism about like a dog man or something like that, but we're just talking about a cougar that may have melanistic qualities. That
Right.
does not seem like such a problem.
Mrs. Jornlin, my melanistic cougar ate my homework.
Oh, that's okay, Richie. It happens all the time.
You see, this is
I'm the best teacher ever.
you really are.
You really were.
Well, Micah, what you had something? I mean, first of all, I did want to hear about your acoustic levitation because Scott famously was ridiculing me about the sonic saw technique being used at ancient sites like Tiwanaku, and I thought, like, well, why not? You know, possibly is that how they got the cuts so perfect? But we never sorted that one out. We just left it as just an open wound. But you said you also had some other updates of something strange happening.
No, I have nothing interesting to talk about. Merry Christmas.
Good
everybody.
night. Good night, Micah. Thanks for coming.
My pleasure. Pleasure to be here. Yeah. First of all, the sonic levitation thing, as far as I know, has very little to do with the idea of the movement of large stone blocks. That was recently a prospect raised by a commentator, which, of course, is always going to be the angle that people take. We're talking about very small things, exceedingly small objects. I mean, little particles that can be captured in a standing wave. Now, this has a lot of medical benefits. This has a lot of unique possible benefits in terms of industry. I don't see any kind of explanation for how the pyramids were built, per se. But it is interesting. Sonic levitation, ladies and gentlemen. If you want to go on Amazon.com, you can actually purchase sonic levitation kits. You can see this in action for yourselves at home. A great last-minute Christmas gift idea. Might even fit inside of a stocking. Now, coming back to the big cats here for just a second. You know, we get a lot of those kind of reports down here in the southeastern United States as well. Allison, you know, to your point about, oh, wow, you know, if we saw coyotes around here, yeah, I see those in my backyard too. But back a few decades ago, it's funny how people would have been resistant to that idea. The large cats, it's incredible. I mean, I see unequivocal, you know, for instance, video footage of what are obviously large cats, similar to what you were just showing us, Paul. And people will say, oh, that's, you know, that's a house. Look, oh my God, look, Richie's got another photo. Two of them. Right.
He's got a problem.
He's got a real problem. Rich, here's your problem. They're multiplying, okay?
I know. We started with one, then one went melanistic. I
It's
don't
the
know.
trouble with tribbles.
But here's the thing.
Yes.
You know, I see people look at the footage and the photographs of what are unequivocally large cats, at least larger cats, and they'll say, oh, you know, that's a house cat, a really big one, but it's just a house cat. And I'm like, listen, let me tell you something. In North America, confirmed, all right, we not only have the western cougar and the Florida panther, the eastern cougar is presumed to be extinct. I have questions about that. But we've also got jaguars that are actually ranging up into Arizona, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and other states. There's archaeological evidence as far north as Pennsylvania of the existence of jaguars in the United States, okay? Back then, it wasn't known as the United States, newsflash. I've talked with hunters, I've talked with hikers, I've talked with people right here in Asheville, North Carolina, who just up the road from where I am, say that they have actually seen what they believe are some variety of large black cat. And based on the description they gave me, the modeled appearance of the cat's fur, I guess, its pelt in the sunlight, seemed to describe to me a jaguar, because even you got to keep in mind, jaguars generally known as being yellow with black spots, but they have a color morph that some can go under, where they have a dark brown kind of a coloration. Under the right lighting, you'll notice they still have those same spots. And so, and again, Paul, Rick Minter and I've talked a good bit about this. We had him on the program with Mike Mays, did an excellent show on the Sasquatch Tracks podcast talking about all of this. The description I received talking with a hunter in my area who said he saw one of these things, and he didn't try to shoot one, but he looked at it through his rifle's scope so he could get a better look. And he said there were clearly splotches or blotches on its coat. This seemed to be a description of a jaguar and its actual spotted appearance, but having undergone that color morph. Now, to Allison's earlier point, if big cats can undergo color morphs, and let's just look at this for a moment, okay? Not just jaguars. We also have a lynx recently that was spotted in Canada that had undergone a black color morph. We also have tigers that undergo a black color morph occasionally. There's an interesting hypothesis I have, and this ties in with something that is not related to cats per se, but I mean, we've seen it in moths, frogs, all kinds of other animals, what's known as industrial melanism, where an animal, as a result of environmental changes, can sometimes rather quickly undergo mutations or other kind of changes that result in a color change that's beneficial to its survival. So I ask, the tawny cougars that we see on the East Coast, presume extinct, but we still hear reports about black panthers over here in the eastern United States. Is it not impossible, or rather I should say, is it impossible, that a color morph is undertaken by those cat species too, like lynxes, like tigers, like jaguars, and other known large cat species? I don't think it's crazy. The interesting thing too is that I've noticed that there's, in terms of the distribution, a bit of an overlap between sightings of where these large carnivores, cats, occur, and where sightings of Sasquatch tend to be prevalent. Where the eastern cougar is presumed to be extinct, we don't hear as many reports about wild men, but I can go back and look in the New York Times archives in the late 19th century, and there are a lot of reports of wild men encounters. But out west, where western cougars are still prevalent, again, there seems to still be a prevalence of Sasquatch reports. We have in the Florida Everglades, we have this, reports of the so-called skunk ape, and that's where the panther species in America that's still, again, well known and very much alive. I've seen videos in recent days. The Florida panther is still seen. So I wonder sometimes if the overlap between the environments where those large species tend to be reported, if that overlap isn't indicative of environmental factors that allow or are conducive to their sustenance, food, perhaps coverage, and, maybe even just the warmer temperatures in some of those environments, or other factors that may be conducive to their prevalence and their continuance. I mean, that's all speculative, but I mean, the one thing that's not speculation to me is that people see big cats. They see them in the UK, and you could make the argument, again, Paul, I think would probably speak to this point, exotic pets, things like that. That's certainly a large number of these sightings, but I'm open to the possibility that, again, some of the known extant animal species do things that lots of wildlife experts simply would never guess and are not open-minded to, but which we have plenty of evidence of. Again, to Allison's point, really, this color morph thing, I don't see why people are so resistant to that idea. I think it's a very good case to be made that some of these animals do undergo some sort of a melanism, and there may be mutations and things that are conducive to that. So anyway, moving right along, I've got a weird story I want to share in very keeping with the tone of tonight. I was at an event earlier this year. A friend of mine, I won't name this individual, but this almost gets into some of that Fortean kind of MIB zone kind of information. This man's a very respected academic, and at an event that we were all at together, he and I and several other speakers, he just kind of disappeared. He just vanished one night, and nobody was sure exactly what happened to him. The next day, he comes out and he says, "I'm sorry, guys, I disappeared early last night. I had to just vanish because I had a very strange experience last night." And I said, "Well, that never happens at events like this. You want to tell me kind of what happened to you?" And he said, "I don't really want to talk about it, but I mean, I will tell you, just because I think as a matter of research, this could be interesting." And the story he told was that there had been a kind of a meet and greet the first night of this event, and an individual had come up to him and said, "There's somebody I want you to meet while you're here." And this individual had come up and he had met with this person, and this individual who he had been introduced to, a man, said, if I could step outside with you, I'd like to talk to you for a few minutes. And so they went outside, and he said that this man sat down, put his hand like on his knee, as though like almost, through touch, was sensing something about our unnamed academic. But he said that they sat down and they spoke and everything. And this man looked him in the eye and told him all these things about himself and his past that, as my friend put it to me, my wife doesn't even know about me. And he said it was so unnerving to him and frightened him so badly that he just had to go back to his room and cash in early for the night. And he would only talk about it privately, and hence why I don't mention his name here, of course. He would only talk about it privately with me and a couple of other people at this event, but he said I was completely baffled and entirely unnerved by some of the things that this individual told me. And I don't have any idea how he knew the things that he said that he knew. But again, this comes back to some of those Keelian, as I call them, Keelian phenomena. John Keel would be preceded by someone, an avatar, some sort of a doppelganger or something, or maybe just people claiming to have, known John. He'd get to the side of, an incident in the West Virginia Valley, and people would say, oh yeah, your assistant was here the other day and she was asking us questions about this. And John, of course, well, my assistant, I don't have an assistant. Who are you talking about? I don't have any assistant working for me, and people who would, the John Keel, I think Rich appreciated that, but he had no idea who these people were who claimed to be working with or for him. And that kind of an aspect is very strange to me, especially when it seems to almost involve a precognitive or an atemporal, i.e. time travel kind of an element. And that seemed to be what my friend was describing. And he said, this person, I don't know if they were a time traveler, I don't know what was going on, or if they read my mind, but there is no way they could have known the things that they knew about me and sat down and told me in the weirdest, creepiest way. And it bothered him so bad that he went to bed and didn't talk about it.
Did this person tell him why he was telling him these things, though?
No, I that much, at least, Jim, wasn't conveyed to me. But, it's not unlike some of those stories that you guys hear, on the campfire. People who have had these almost like time slip kind of experience.
Yeah, sure.
Sometimes your environment changes and you're stuck in the middle of something that doesn't match your temporal relationship to space-time. Sometimes you meet people who seem to have come from someplace else. And that's how this guy described this. And it's just really, really strange. I've never had one of those experiences myself. I'm the most boring guy who studies the weirdest stuff ever, happened. But because of that, I guess people send me cool books. So, I got to come back around to what Rich was talking about with cool first edition books. Look at this. Yeah. There we go. Yeah. Might as well make this. Yeah. So this, my good pal, Jason Pentrail, sent this to me a few years back, but one of those original Amazing Stories magazines.
That's awesome.
Crazy.
All these first editions, you guys are all bragging about your first editions. I got my first edition copy of the Histories by Herodotus, signed by Herodotus. He signed it. I know. So I couldn't even read it. But
if you had that verified? Yeah.
I'm just kidding. Now check this out. Back here on the shelf behind me, I'd been shopping one time for used books, and I came across a copy of Art Bell's The Quickening. And from the high desert in the great American Southwest. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be. This is Coast to Coast AM. I am Art Bell. Linda Bolton Howell joins us in mere moments, but first, look at this. Lo and behold, I get home.
Oh my God!
Wow!
Signed by the master himself, Art Bell.
Amazing. That's amazing.
What a surprise was that! But
Each to the rockets, you're on the air.
Here's
Look at
Look at that!
Everybody's.
You guys need to compare. You need to compare and see who's real and who's
I
fake.
don't know
Jim.
who's real, who's fake. Here, let's see.
Is that
They
the
look
same
the
book?
same to me. They do look the same.
Yeah.
Okay, there's.
Let's show the little books.
Wait, get yours out again, Micah.
Jim, is that the same book? Let me see the
No,
cover.
this is The Art of Talk.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
Oh yeah.
No, look, yeah, the
Let's see. I
Yeah.
think it is the same.
Yeah, it looks pretty much the same.
yeah, but it's
I don't
not
know.
it's obviously a
I have
real.
no idea. I have no idea whose is real. I bought this off of
There might
Amazon or
be
eBay or
differences.
something. So
There might be
I'm not
differences.
claiming that mine's real.
I think that is his legitimate signature, and there are minute differences. But I mean, you can actually, when you hold this up, you can clearly see that this is actually drawn with a blue ballpoint.
Oh yeah,
pen.
this too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Wow.
Somebody
Isn't that
signed
cool?
That's very
Well,
cool.
if I may, here's one more real cool thing, though, too. We're talking about these first edition copies of books. Rich, you will appreciate this. Paul, I bet you will, too.
Dare you.
Anybody know what this book is? You're going to have a hard time guessing from this angle.
From that
No. What is it?
hardy.
old
Perhaps
one.
this will help. This will help a little bit if I turn it.
Cover.
Oh,
Jacques
Vallée. Wow.
Yeah, Jacques Vallée, a first edition Regnery copy of Anatomy of a Phenomenon. This gifted to me by my dear friend Patrick Green. A first edition. That's really cool, but this is also cool. The other day, right here at Christmas time, I hadn't expected this. I got a package in the mail, and I didn't recognize the address, and I opened the package, and what it was a copy of Jacques and Paula's recent book Trinity. And then I opened it up, and of course Jacques had inscribed it and had mailed me a copy
Oh, wow.
of
That's
his.
pretty awesome.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
so now I have a first edition copy of his first book,
Yeah.
and I have a signed copy of his most recent book. So
Wow.
that's kind of cool. But Jacques, and Jim probably knows this, Jacques has always been a hero of mine and just a
Yep.
delightful guy, just a wonderful researcher.
I finally got to interview him this year. He was awesome.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Thanks to
Micah, that's
our
really-
friend Chrissy.
Micah, I've got to do this before we finish tonight.
Yes,
But,
please, because I know it's getting late over there for you.
well, yeah, it's nearly 1 a.m. here. But let's see if you recognise this studio. With I'm sitting in the chair there. Do you reckon? Yeah,
Oh God! Well, that looks like that almost looks like Art Bell's studio, but
that is Art Bell's studio.
oh my gosh!
Correct.
Okay, you got to explain this. You got to explain that now.
Wow.
So yeah, I got to meet him very briefly, and but I'd gone over there and took a drive past, and I was friends with Heather Wade, who was Art Bell's protege for quite a
Midnight
while.
in the Desert.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the time, she was using that studio, and she let me sit in the chair and try on his headphones. And
Wow.
yeah, life never got any better than that. So
Wow.
That's
And she was
amazing.
great too.
yeah,
Well,
He is
I
the
still love
originator.
listening. I love listening to those old Art Bell episodes, and that's one of the reasons. Actually, again, Jim would both recognize and respect this. The Heil PR40, this microphone right here, has been used by many excellent broadcasters. Jim Harold is one of them. Leo Laporte is one of them. But Art Bell he used a lot of different microphones, but he always said he loved the sound of the PR40. Now, I saw him using an Electro Voice RE20. I saw him using other microphones too. He even had that headset thing, which Jim, you may know what that headset mic was. It looked like something you use while you're flying an aircraft. But
Yeah.
but I always heard him talk about the PR40, and that's the
And
reason
he
I
probably used Heil stuff because he was a ham. And Heil made a lot of stuff for ham radio operators.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It was known that he would after his program at night, he would sign off and then he'd get on his ham rig and he would talk to hams all over the world. And there are some recordings even of Art. So imagine that after you've listened to him doing his late night broadcast, you get on your ham radio and you're tuning in and everything and listening to everybody. When there's Art Bell, you hear that unmistakable voice, just chatting with his buddies, the hams,
He is the originator. I always say this.
Yeah.
Everybody that does this in any form, whether it's traditional broadcast, it's podcast or whatever, that's the guy who set the standard. He's kind of, Paul, our guy for late night shows here in America is Johnny Carson. I equate him to Johnny Carson for late night shows. He is that to paranormal radio and by extension podcasts. He is the originator, and he's the one that I think in many ways made it all possible.
Absolutely. Well, I think we're getting kind of near the end here. There's a couple things we'd like to do. Michael, we definitely want to have you play some for us, but I think we're going to save that for the end. One thing that we would like to do now before we start to wrap things up, I think, is talk about somebody that most of us know. And Gled, I know it is so late there. You are free to jump off if you want, anytime you want.
I'm going to stay to the bitter end.
Okay.
All right.
Ride it out.
Winston Churchill would be proud of your.
I hereby raise my glass to you, said Paul.
We can fight them on the beaches.
We will fight them in the streamyard.
So we wanted to take a moment to reflect on someone who several of us have interviewed, some more than others, and also was a good friend of Allison's, been on your show several times, Jim, and that would be Linda Godfrey, who recently passed away. Yeah. This is she's an amazing author who was a pioneer. She wrote this book, several books, but we had her on to talk about Monsters Among Us, The Beast of Bray Road. She was an expert on, among many other things. When we had her on, it was amazing because her her ability to peel back the layers of things that accompanied these cryptid sightings and these strange sightings in a way that she looked into details that a lot of people overlooked and found common ground and really strange circumstances around things. Yeah, that is so cool. But I don't know, Allison, maybe you want to talk about her. I know that you were close with her.
Yeah, I just love Linda, and shout out, call back to Paul. One of her last projects was Return to Wildcat Mountain. She made a movie with her son Nate Godfrey about the melanistic cats, big cats in Wisconsin. And
look at that.
Yeah,
Wow.
so this was just a great project that she worked on with Nate, and she was just such a mentor to me, and it's a great loss because not only did she bring to light the Bray Road Beast, which is our wild man in Wisconsin. Starting in the 80s, she was researching just the end of the 80s. She wrote a lot of books about a lot of things. Even, her last book was, I believe this one, Haunted Wisconsin, and which is really cool. She even got me into the book, and I contributed some stories. She was so I think this was probably her last book because it's 2021. But other than being this great journalist of the paranormal, she was really just a friend that couldn't be surpassed. She because of my friend, our mutual friend, Kevin Nelson, who's an author. He referred to her in his comments after he learned of her death that she was kind of the den mother for Wisconsin researchers. And I mean, that certainly was the case for me. She just, back in 2017, I was doing a lot of YouTube videos investigating local paranormal sightings and not so local, all the way from Milwaukee to Chicago and back again and again, because I thought it was important. Like, hey, we're having a big flap. Somebody's got to get there on the ground and actually take video of the sighting locations. So she was really worried about me, and she gave me a protective amulet, and she hung it in my on my rearview mirror, and it was actually gifted to her back in around 2006 when she did a monster quest about the Wisconsin man bat sighted near La Crosse, Wisconsin, and the witness actually gave her this amulet, and then she gifted it to me as protection because I drive around too much, and that was just it just shows her kindness, and that she would just think it was one of the things she gave to me. She was always bearing gifts and getting me paying speaking gigs and paying writing opportunities, and she was just she was like a motherly figure to me, but also like a fun friend because she would go out on walks with me and like some mutual friends that she called like her strong women group. So we'd go hiking in the lower Kettle Moraine, southern Kettle Moraine. I go hiking because they're also looking for a possible Bigfoot, which you thought might be in the area. But they were good hikes regardless. She'd have me over to her house and, so she was a spontaneous kind of friend that like really made me feel like a giggly teenager again when we'd have sleepovers and she'd make brownies and we'd just, watch spooky paranormal documentaries. So, I mean, she was just a one of a kind person, and we lost her to Parkinson's just after Thanksgiving this year, and it's quite a great loss. I try to look at it as I'm building my team over on the other side.
Yeah.
It was a really devastating loss, not just for research, but of course for her family and friends.
Yeah.
Sure.
And Jim, you had her on your show a few times as well, didn't you?
Yeah, she was on the show 3 times. And first of all, she was very, very, in my experience, a nice person. I did not know her like Allison knew her. But the one thing I want to say is I was re-listening to some things that we had done with her in kind of reflection. And it came across to me how much she respected the experiencers. And she wanted to do right by them, cataloging their experiences. And when I think of her, I think of a lot of parallels between other authors in this realm that I admire. The late, great Rosemary Ellen Guiley, Brad Steiger, who is also no longer with us, Nick Redfern, who is happily with us. People who have made a career and who have written in multiple ways, whether it's articles or books or whatever it might be, in a very professional, journalistic way, a very solid way, very well done, but also leaving a space open for belief and a space open for the reality of these things. And it's a really fine line. And few people can walk it well, I think. And Linda, along with some of the other people I've mentioned, and there's others, of course. I think she was one of those people who was uniquely able to do that, be professional, respect the experiencers. Yet, I think underneath, she believed these things were real, but always did a very, very solid job of it. And as everyone said, it's a loss, and may she rest in peace.
Well said.
And Allison, you had said that if people wanted to make donations in her name, how does that work? We go
Yes. So you go to michaeljfox.org and you'll just see over in the right nav, there's a big orange donate button.
Okay.
And then once you're on the page, it asks you if you want to donate in someone's memory. And then you can, put in her name. And if you happened to know her like I did, I know her husband, Steve, is still answering some of her emails. So you can send, put that email in and send a message to him. But, I'm sure, the family is probably notified in some way. But it's just a really nice gesture. And it's also, I think Parkinson's is a devastating disease, and it's great to be able to at least use the passing as a way to get more donations for Parkinson's research.
And also buy her books and read them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And like you said, Jim, she was very open-minded. She was very respectful of the experiencers. And she was also open to being skeptical. When I became skeptical about certain things, I mean, she still embraced me and was open to discussing it. And so, I mean, she really taught me that, you don't have to believe everything that comes your way to be an investigator. She was an investigator that investigated, and when things didn't seem to to line up, she would talk about that. She would just lay it all out as she found it. And I really respected her and, just loved her as a friend.
I think too, it's so great to see other women in this. No offense to all the men here. You all do great work as well.
It's none
None
taken.
taken.
No, you're right. You're absolutely
But
right.
growing up a weird girl, especially going to Catholic school, which you'd think, all the ritual, they'd accept me more. But I read Beast of Bray Road when I was pretty young. And we need more of that. We need more little girls reading weird books. We need more women and, folks just getting involved and feeling confident and not feeling kind of like the same thing if you like metal. If you wear a Metallica shirt, they go, what are your 5 favorite albums? I always have my 5 favorite albums and my 5 favorite cryptids at the ready. So hopefully if you're, a woman and you're intimidated for any reason, take her trailblazing as an example and do the same, because I think that's probably what she would want.
Thank you.
I wasn't on the interview, but just by her writing I can tell.
Thank you so much for mentioning that. That young girls, need to see that, just like they can be in the sciences, they can be in the paranormal, and there's plenty of people even in the past that maybe they haven't gotten the adulation that some men have, but they certainly put in the work that is comparable or even surpasses male work in the subject. And certainly there's been women in the paranormal for as long as it has existed, and they're not just mediums or poltergeist agents. They're not just people beset by the paranormal. I saw this. No, I mean, there are women who investigated as well, and those people really need to be showcased.
I couldn't agree more.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, anyone else? Forrest always likes to check before we go to a little bit of a closing. Does anyone else have anything else, lightning round, that they want to share before we throw it over to Micah for a minute for a little bit of music and wrap up the holiday special?
Tess always has something unusual and fascinating happen to her at the most unexpected time. When do you ever expect it, other than the next hours when we talk to her next, something weird has happened?
I promise. And it's never anything big. It's usually, sharing a listener story, a weird coincidence, seeing an astonishing legend sticker on the stop sign outside of the Hirshhorn Museum in D.C., which is my home state. That's not a state. I don't get one of those. But I did do something that I would like to suggest. If you are spending time with friends or family this Christmas Eve, you can tell ghost stories, but you can also do the Estes method. Over the summer, I participated in the Estes method with the hosts Brian and Eric from Brian and Eric Don't Belong Here, the podcast, after our Paracon experience. And it was weird and delightful. And in the group, actually, Brian's mom joined in, who has I feel like we always bring our friends and families who have no idea what an Estes method is. They think it's just a skiing destination or something. And I had the opportunity to do it. And it's definitely, I wouldn't say anything major or shocking happened or was revealed, but it definitely gave us some goosebumps. And I think the Newkirks really are pioneers. And we've talked about it on the show, but if you have the chance and you can't convince someone to sit down for a story, try getting them to do the Estes method. I will share in the chat the directions of how to do it.
Yes.
Cool.
Well, Sir Micah, would you be able to share some of your musical stylings with us as we wrap up tonight?
I think I might be able to, although I must, for this to really work well, I have to get a guitar, okay?
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, get the guitar. And for everyone else, thank you so much for joining us, for taking the time to be with us this year. We really, really appreciate it. And it means a lot to us to have such good friends come and support us. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And I just, kind of tying into what Tess was saying, there's I've been recently reading into some, I guess you'd call it metaphysical self-improvement. And one thing I came across that I thought was pretty special. I've been trying to get Scott to do it, and I encourage everyone to do it. And it's something that I think that everyone here would agree with, in that the concept is basically taking note. And you can even keep a tiny journal by your nightstand, and before you go to bed, before you go to sleep, write down the magic you witnessed that day. And it could be a coincidence. It could be something synchronistic, something that you saw that was pleasant. As I was telling the group, as I passed by on my way in today, a little after 11, near a Panera Bread, I helped a woman open her Jack Daniel's bottle for her so she could have an Irish coffee. And that was my my holiday gift to this person, that she could enjoy the rest of her afternoon. And I will soon be doing that as soon as we're over. But just every day, just something that you see that's odd, make a note of it. And what will happen by practitioners of this is that you'll see the more magic come into the world. You'll see more coincidences. You will see more wondrous things that happen to you that you encounter, because part of it is just noticing. It's paying attention. That's the first part. And as much as you can, don't dismiss the wonderfulness of odd things that happen in life, because that's the spice of life in some respects. So try that. Coming into this new year, just jot down when something happens, because the art and act of writing it down, there's something to that. And it's not only just for your memory, but it opens it up, and you'll see that the magic and weirdness and wonderfulness of our world is all around us if you just pay attention.
There you go.
And I hope that was enough time for Micah to get the electronic tuner going first.
Indeed. You did a masterful job there, my liege. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
So I think I'm all set. Let me just make sure that is this all coming through okay here?
Yeah, it sounds good.
I'm testing out some new equipment here tonight for this broadcast, right? So I'll make sure everything sounds okay. If this gets too hot, let me know.
Okay.
So, along with Linda Godfrey, unfortunately, in recent days, we also lost a tremendous icon in international ufology, A.J. Javard. A.J. was arguably the best-known Brazilian ufologist. He was a dear friend of mine, too. Spending time down there in Brazil, and I've spent a lot of time down there in Brazil, I got to know A.J. very well. And, he was a kind person. He was supposed to be at the International UFO Congress this year, and he wasn't able to make it because of some health problems that ultimately claimed his life 2 days ago. And so, like those icons, again, AJ, Linda, so many others, some of the folks that Jim mentioned there, Brad Steiger, tremendous friend, influence. There are so many people who have come and gone in this field, but I think that it's very important to remember them and the way that their work continues in our lives, in our memories. And so the old tradition in Christmas spirit of the British Isles was to tell ghost stories around Christmas. I don't know why we got away from that. People don't like to associate ghost stories with Christmas. But again, the idea of the past, the present, and the future, that's an important thing, I think. And it's important to remember those who've come before us, those who are here with us, those who are yet to come. And as strange and as eldritch as some of this human experience that we all share together is at times, the fact that we share it together is very important. And so I'll put this one out to AJ and everybody else that we've lost, and in good memory and in fond spirits of the season right here. Let's just hope I'm in tune, right? And just a second, my Bluetooth is going out. There it is. I think my Bluetooth is going to make me use a microphone. Hang on. You got to love that. Live radio, ladies and gentlemen. You go. That's nice.
Yay, that was fantastic.
Thank you so much, Micah. Thank you. Well, everyone, thank you so much for coming. Merry Christmas and happy holidays to all, and to all a good night.